There's no genuine, pure human creativity, no authentic, non-technological human to defend from or contrast to AI tools like Stable Diffusion. And there are two aspects to this relation between the human and the non-human that I want to highlight in particular. And they can be distinguished somewhat crudely as the external and the internal. So I'll just take the external first. So in his 2024 book, Literary Theory for Robots, Dennis Tenen argues that writing has never been a solitary activity carried out by a lone human genius in a study or office. You know, Virginia Woolf's iconic "A Room of One's Own." Writing and the making of meaning only occurs as part of a complicated system of authors and texts, machines and technologies, institutions and infrastructures, all operating far beyond the scale of a single natural intellect, produce what are massively collaborative acts of intelligence. The internet, for example, is positioned as a co-author of Honor Levy's 2024 collection of post-internet short stories, My First Book. Levy, who's an It Girl blogger and podcaster and New York City scenester, infuses her prose with Gen Z internet stylings, ASCII art, emojis, Twitter speak, memes, and social media slang. Yet in every other respect, it's having only Levy's name on the cover, its assignment of copyright solely to her, and so forth. Her book is entirely conventional. By comparison, why is it doing that? By comparison, Tenen, an ex-software engineer at Microsoft turned literature professor, is more cautious, being reluctant to take things as far as positioning machines as co-authors, even as a marketing ploy. While he concedes to a diminished share of authorial agency, he's not eager to cede authorship of his book altogether, merely pointing to smart devices like spell checkers and dictionaries and search engines as examples of non-human agents that assist in shaping not only how we write, but what we write. Humans have been thinking in this way with and through machines for centuries, just as machines have been thinking with and through us, Tenen nevertheless insists. AI is simply the latest addition to this already complex collaborative network that in Woolf's case also included her servants. AI is just another way to give that collaborative a voice, and I'm guessing a servant of one's own probably didn't have the same ring for Woolf. So in this respect, AI, for me, isn't here to replace us, steal our jobs, or automate our roles out of existence. AI is here to change how we understand authorship. The real provocation of AI is it pushes us to actively engage with the question of what authorship and creativity and copyright are and can become. Are our books co-authored by technologies as Levy's work is taken to suggest? Or do machines merely assist us as part of a complex collaborative network, as Tenen argues? Either way, rather than continue to act in algorithmic, robotic, pre-programmed terms ourselves, AI gives us the chance to finally reckon with the hybrid, collective, more than human nature of authorship and creativity. There we go. And if this is true of writing, then I'd argue it's also true of art. Instead of viewing art as something only humans can produce, because only their work can be considered authentic, born of deeply rooted lived personal experience, art too should be understood as a social and collective endeavour in which some elements of the shadow teams involved are non-human. In the case of computational art, such technological collaborators potentially include desktop and laptop computers, search engines, social media platforms, yeah, and now AI engines like Midjourney. So turning now to the internal relation between human and non-human. We can also argue that there's no non-technological human to contrast to AI, that all art is produced by hybrid assemblages of humans and non-human technologies by virtue of the concept of technogenesis, original technicity, and originary prothesis that found in the work of theorists such as Jacques Derrida and Bernard Stiegler and N. Catherine Hales. From this perspective, the human cannot be defined, as is traditionally the case, in binary or dialectical opposition to non-human technology, quite simply because there's no pre-existing, authentic, natural, non-technological human in the first place. The human's only possible. It only comes into being through its relation to technology, most obviously in the form of language. Need to go back now. Hold on, there we go. Technology here is not merely an external tool, separate from the human and foreign to it, as the classical Aristotelian view would suggest. Technology is also integral to what and who humans are, hence originary technicity. It actually shapes how humans think, act, and exist in the world. And in fact, this originary prosthetic relation to technology is what defines the human and distinguishes it from other animals, even though certain species, such as dolphins and elephants, have been found to use tools and communicate in ways that approach aspects of language. Human thoughts and ideas aren't formed in advance then, and only transmitted through media technologies after the fact. Instead, they arise out of the dynamic relationship between humans and media, being created, this is the genesis in technogenesis, to a large degree by the tools and technologies that use to express them, as well as by the act of expression itself. It follows that because the human only emerges by virtue of its co-constitutive relation to technology, then as media technologies change, so does human subjectivity, consciousness, and cognition. To put it another way, as the dominant media material apparatuses by which subjectivity is produced change, so do our thoughts and ideas. The philosopher Bernard Stiegler distinguishes three major forms of media technological reproducibility in the West: the letter, the analog, and the digital. And to these, we might now want to add a fourth, what you might call the post-digital of artificial intelligence. And one of the key questions I want to address in books such as Mass Media is not just what it means for art and creativity if they emerge from such an original relation to AI, but also how we might engage with contemporary computational media technologies as what Stiegler refers to as pharmaca, not only as poisons, but also as cures. So that's one of the arguments for liquidating AI art. But as has been kind of mentioned, my title also derives from two of this year's events at CAS. The Distant Scoundrels talk on March 26th, and the accompanying exhibition and booklet by Sean Carroll, we've heard from earlier, and the Radical Past and Future of the Computer Art Society presentation on July the 7th, which was also by Sean. In this context, Liquidate AI art is, yes, it's a reference to, well, firstly, the short-lived International Coalition for the Liquidation of Art, a group of artists that included Gustav Metzger, who was the first editor of the CAS bulletin page, and it was concerned with the art world's complicity in capitalist structures. In 1970, the coalition staged an intervention at the Tate Gallery, seeking to enter into discussion with gallery staff and visitors about the role of cultural institutions in perpetuating sexism, racism, and war. Secondly, my title relates in this context to an assertion by another early CAS member, Frieda Necker, that there should be no computer art, because computer art should not be seen as a separate category of art. The art should not be divided into commodifiable, collectible styles, genres, or fashions based on the tools used to create it. For Necker, questions such as, can computers be creative? Or is creativity a trait exclusive to human beings? Which have been raised and definitively answered by Emily Bender and co. in their infamous Stochastic Parrots paper. These kind of questions are irrelevant given all the other problems we face. And for me, such disruption should include challenging the Euro-Western modernist ontological divide between human and non-human that liberal humanists such as Bender and co. are so anxious to maintain, as indeed are many of the artists in the Listen Scoundrels booklet, when they position the computer merely as a tool that augments the artist. As such, Liquidate AI art is also building on a book that I have coming out the next month or so. It's called Defund Culture, which shows how funding and support in the UK's creative industries overwhelmingly benefit upper and middle class, privately educated Oxbridge graduates. As late as 2017, it was found that half the country's poets and novelists attended private school, and 44% were educated at Oxbridge. Yet between just 6 and 7% of the UK population go to a private school, and approximately 1% graduate from Oxford or Cambridge. Such structural inequality cannot be rectified by means of social mobility initiatives that include more diverse groups in a system that has historically excluded them, in which they weren't involved in building in the first place. If we do that, the now predominantly upper and middle class, and indeed straight, white, male and liberal humanist culture, that will still thrive. There'll just be more women and northerners and people of colour involved in creating and disseminating it, regardless of whether they identify as white, male and middle class or not. And I'm building here on feminist theorist Sarah Ahmed's notion of white men as an institution, as a persistent structure or mechanism of social order governing the behaviour of a set of individuals. So white men refers not simply to who is given a place at the table, but to conduct, institutions, systems, structures, culture. These two are white and male. So instead, we need to defund this white male middle class system and invest in the development of alternative, non-modernist, non-liberal humanist approaches, institutions and values instead. And one way to do this is by strategically redistributing money and resources to other parts of society, and particularly experiments with rethinking art and culture beyond the white male middle class and liberal humanist norm, with a view to generating creativity in the UK that really is more diverse and hopefully also less intellectual, boring and risk averse than a lot of it is now. What forms might such defunding take? I'm going to provide an example of something that was discussed at the CAS event on July the 7th, which was copyright. There's a number of reasons copyright is crucial in this context. For one thing, it's a major driver of inequality. Copyright plays a pivotal but often overlooked role with regard to understanding the roots of disparities of wealth in modern societies. For another, copyright disproportionately serves the capitalist corporate interests that Metzger and Naker are so critical of, while restricting access to knowledge, ideas, and the cultural commons. The wealthiest corporations globally derive their power primarily from owning copyright and patents, with 16 of the 50 richest people in the world amassing their fortunes entirely or partially from copyright-related industries. And one way of radically redistributing opportunities and resources throughout society would therefore be to defund the UK's intellectual property and copyright regime. This could be achieved by scaling back or even cancelling state funding for those agencies responsible for copyright enforcement, such as the UK Intellectual Property Office and trading standards offices. Instead of continuing to prop up restrictive closed access sectors that rely on copyright monopolies, public investment could be redirected towards exploring alternative, non-rivalrous modes of producing and sharing knowledge and ideas. Community-controlled infrastructures, such as artist-led platform cooperatives, together with commons-based approaches to cultural production. These might include the adoption of free, labour and open source creative tools and collective licensing models like the ones shown here, even liquidating the very idea of IP and copyright. If we continue to follow Metzger, Naker and CAS's radical past, yet another reason to liquidate AI art is that it's become deeply entangled with establishment interests. It functions less as a critique than as collectible, marketable products for dealers, curators, and collectors. As Alexandra Geffen argues in his contribution to the catalogue for the World Through AI exhibition in Paris this summer, the arrival of AI in art has not been marked by a dramatic aesthetic rupture or sudden emergence of new forms. The early experiments with GANs between 2018 and 2020, such as those by Robbie Barrett, the French collective Obvious, and Mario Klinkerman, were novel in their technique, yet the images they generated were not truly unprecedented within our existing visual traditions. Nor are the later diffusion models or the immersive data-driven video installations of Sophia Crespo, Memo Atkin, or Refik Anadol radically different. Rather than inaugurating new and innovative and challenging genres, we might argue with Geffen that much of this work merely recycles already proven aesthetic styles using cheaper and more automated processes. There's a couple of things to say here. First, it's worth noting how this situation aligns with Arthur Danto's well-known thesis from the late 1990s on the end of art. For Danto, the era of sequential art movements, Impressionism, Cubism, Abstract Expressionism, that began in the late 19th century, ended in the 60s with pop art and minimalism. Since then, art has ceased to move in identifiable collective directions. There are still individual artists, but no longer coherent styles or paradigms. And interestingly, what follows, according to Danto, is not a new art form, but theory and philosophy. Second thing to say here is we can see how, far from offering the kind of radical critique or cultural transformation that Metzger and Naker were looking towards, A lot of art today has been thoroughly commodified. It's hyped, circulated, speculated about, and invested in like any other asset. Accordingly, just as I called for culture to be defunded, so I'd maintain we should liquidate art too, with a view to redistributing the associated resources and assets to other areas of society. Here again, the aim is to generate and support creativity that's less bourgeois, establishment and commodified, less white, male and middle class, less monotonous, homogeneous and tepid. Now, I realise this idea of liquidating art is obviously counterintuitive, so I'm going to just say a little bit more about it. According to the psychoanalyst Adam Phillips in his recent book On Giving Up, the point of art being difficult is that it resists our easy appropriation of it. Art, in this sense, unsettles and disrupts preconceptions. Art resists and sabotages our familiar habits and perception. And Phillips suggests that to feel alive, we have to give up our habitual tactics and techniques for deadening ourselves. And that art has traditionally been one means of doing so. Yet art's now all too familiar, Phillips insists. As such, it must be placed alongside work and clothes and furniture on the lists of means of habitualization begun by the literary critic Victor Shklovsky in his 1917 essay, Art as Technique. I should stress that this view of art is not confined to Danto and Phillips. The poet Vladimir Mayakovsky, whose 1922 poem Listen Scoundrels gives its title to the CAS booklet, announced that museums as places where art is displayed were dead shrines. And long before either, the philosopher Hegel argued that art at its highest level belonged to the past, no longer holding the significant role in human culture it once did, having been surpassed in this respect by philosophy and reason. Politics today, whether in the hands of Trump, Farage or Tommy Robinson, is about telling an emotional story that's easily conveyed and understood. Art is supposed to offer something different. But is this the role art actually plays for most people? Let's go back to the Tate. Tate Modern is the most visited gallery in the world. Yet how much of these visitors have been unsettled by the art? How much of this experience is generating what philosophers such as Alain Badiou and Jean-François Lyotard call an event? And how much is simply cultural tourism, familiar spectacle? As the political theorist Frederick Jameson infamously says, modernism no longer shocks because it's been institutionalized by dealers, curators, critics, collectors, and art galleries like Tate. In this respect, my title also relates to at least 3 of the 5 calls to action from the early CAS distilled by Sean Carroll. Reject institutional apathy, break free from the art market system, and create art that intervenes in the world. It also goes along with Adam Phillips's claim that interruption, in Shklovsky's terms, is the only cure for familiarization. So how do we pay attention to the automatic, the habitualized, and defamiliarize and interrupt it? And remember, what we're really talking about is dislodging the white and the male and the middle class system of art, culture and its institutions. The reason I work in a university, even though I'm not sure it's always been a particularly welcome or supportive place, but you know, I'm a Macam who publishes radical theory, so you know, what can I expect? The reason I work in a university is because the point of universities is to provide spaces where society's accepted, taken for granted collective beliefs can be examined and interrogated and put to the test. In this case, even as the Euro-Western universities being placed under increasing pressure to abandon this role, whether through attacks on Harvard and Columbia by Trump, or the neoliberal insistence higher education serve primarily an instrumental economic function, creating jobs and generating wealth. Within the university, one sphere in particular that's focused on questioning the common sense, the customary, the familiar, the masked, is critical theory. Often associated in the UK with English literature and elsewhere with philosophy. Which brings us back to Danto. For what follows the end of art, for him, remember, is precisely theory. It's theory that makes something at a given time understandable as art and other things not. Yet if Phillips's book on giving up raises its own implicit question, namely what other forms of habitualization should be added to the list alongside art, clothes and furniture, one suggestion might well be theory. And I mention this because I wouldn't like you to think that all this impacts on art and AI, but not on what I'm doing here with you today. If we wanted to be generous, I suppose we could say that theory is perhaps a little less habitualized and part of the establishment than a lot of art. And this is because, well, theory is by definition concerned with interrupting the taken for granted. What is a theorist? Eric Rogoff asks. Rather than the accumulation of theoretical tools and materials, the work of theory is to unravel the very ground on which it stands. And this is why it's important for university academics and scholars especially to be prepared to lead the way on this. It's our job, if you like. But it's also been harder to commodify theory and turn it into a branch of the culture or heritage industries. This is why there's not really a theory equivalent of Tate Modern or Frieze, which started today. And certainly if we want to understand art and technology and computer arts and AI and the effects on culture and society today, one way of doing so is by turning to those theorists who have already attempted to grapple with these subjects. Critical thinkers in the tradition of Heidegger and Adorno and Flusser and Baudrillard and Haraway and Hales. Should be bonus points for any anyone that recognise who this is, but I think we need some young people for that. Yet in many respects, these theorists, in this kind of tradition of Heidegger and co, belong not to the age of AI or even the computer, but to that of Gutenberg and the book. Their primary way of reflecting on art and computers and the implications of AI has been to write monumental long-form arguments in the form of codex print books, published with commercial for-profit presses under all rights reserved copyright licenses, as products to be bought and sold. So while theory may be somewhat less commodified and habitualized than art, it still has its own habits. After all, this is what thinkers have been doing for decades, if not centuries. And this includes Danto and books such as After the End of Art. The question is, how appropriate is it to still operate like this? To what extent can we fully understand things in the post-Gutenberg galaxy, or at least in an age that appears to be moving out of that of Gutenberg to something else we don't quite understand yet, if, out of habit, we persist in acting as though we still live in that of Gutenberg? Do we not need to defamiliarize and interrupt the common sense, the taken for granted in respect of theory too? Perhaps even dislodge them. As for art, so for theory then. To avoid a living death, here too it seems we need to reject institutional apathy, break free from the market system, and create theory that intervenes in the world. To do so requires that we explore alternative modes of working and thinking about art and computers and AI that are perhaps more tuned to a post-Gutenberg context, but which, in rejecting what are for some the outdated structures and frameworks of the legacy theory world of the print book, don't simply embrace the other ready-made option we're encouraged to adopt. This is the equally white male and middle-class fears of big tech and big AI disruption, and those crowd-funded internet theorists who build an audience using social media, such as Twitter and Instagram, along with micropayment and subscription-based sites like Substack and Patreon. By bypassing the traditional liberal gatekeepers, which are universities, academic presses, peer-reviewed journals, these liberal gatekeepers of the old elite, these internet theorists present themselves as independent. Yet too often, this online sphere revolves around, and through its norms and standards actively produces, the neoliberal subjectivity of the commodified authentic self and cult of personality. As Morgan Billiard observes, in this environment, the use of self, one's voice, face, and opinions, long rejected by traditional academic standards of rigor, is proven highly effective. We could even speculate that such fashionable self-organized theory will likely follow a trajectory set out by other cultural forms. As the writer Rachel Oresti has suggested in relation to pop music, Taylor Swift's success points to a future where value derives less from what unique innovations in the form can be created with musical instruments or technologies, and more from the carefully staged appeal of an individual human personality. Theory in this framing will likewise have to distinguish itself from old school print books on the one hand, and the likes of AI-generated fake theory texts published on Amazon Kindle Direct and the dead internet on the other. It'll do so by foregrounding the unique human personality of the theorist, who engages with their audience using newsletters, podcasts, interviews, and videos, along with access to opportunities for chats, tutorials, even details of diets and gym workouts. These are forms that emphasize presence, authenticity, relatability, and engagement over original argument or conceptual or formal innovation. From my point of view, to remain alive, what's needed is neither of these options, but something else besides. And this is what I and my various collaborators are trying to develop and explore with projects such as Open Humanities Press and Liquid Living book series and so on. We're trying to intervene in, make strange and dislodge the familiar, habitualized forms of legacy theory to create new forms of thinking that are fit for purpose in the post-Gutenberg galaxy. So again, the point of AI from this perspective is to push us to ask, what is authorship, originality, creativity, art, theory, rather than ourselves continuing to be algorithmic, machinic, and robotic? Questions some would say we should have been addressing all along, but haven't, because the enduring power and authority of liberalism and humanism, capitalism, and the book means we've taken them for granted, and that our ideas and techniques of authorship and originality have become familiar, customary, masked. Okay, so to come back to the question, how do we give up our habitual tactics and techniques for deadening ourselves when it comes to how we write and publish and disseminate our ideas concerning art and AI? Since we're thinking not just about research and theory, but but also computer art and computers. Perhaps the most appropriate way for us to consider how we can do so is in terms of datum points. Datum being the singular of the plural data. A datum refers to a proposition taken as a given, often to construct a theoretical framework or generate a conclusion. In engineering, the datum point is the fixed position from which all subsequent measurements are made. The datum point is not itself subject to scrutiny, however. Its authority derives precisely from its status as an unquestioned baseline. It's the point that you measure everything else, but you don't measure it itself. And what I'm going to do now, and in fact what I've been doing all along today, is examine some of the datum points that are assumed and taken for granted when it comes to the composition and production and distribution of theory and computer art and AI. In mass media, I provide an incomplete list of some of these datum points. The kind of thing you'd find masked and unmarked in the work of Heidegger, Adorno, Flusser, Haraway and co. on art and technology. But there are others, including politics and publishing and the human. And again, I realise some people are probably going to find this eccentric, provocative even. I'm aware a lot of what I have to say might be a bit strange and counterintuitive. But remember, that's the point. Yes, it'd be easy if I just went along with the critical consensus and insisted that AI is best understood through the lens of a ready-made political framework. Thatcherism, for Dan McQuillan, fascism, McQuillan again, or Marxist fragment on machines, Matteo Pasquinelli. The AI is nihilist, David Columbia, stupid, James Bridle, parrot-like, Emily Bender and co., synthetic shit, Kate Crawford here. That extractive and exploitative companies like Meta and Google and OpenAI should stop stealing people's creativity. And to prevent this, the existing copyright regulations should be strengthened, just as legacy creators, including Kate Bush and Paul McCartney, argued in the ultimately unsuccessful Make It Fair campaign. But for one thing to do that would be to just go along with the familiar, the automatic, the common sense, which following Phillips and Nacker and Shklovsky is what I want to question. For another, the political itself is not a program, Marxist, post-Marxist, feminist, liberal, psychoanalytic, that can be rolled out like an operating manual and applied to every situation. As the political theorists Ernesto Leclerc and Chantal Mouffe remind us, the political is a decision that's always taken in an undecidable terrain. And that's what distinguishes it from politics for them. It's true that some have recently argued that criticising critiques of AI is robotic and algorithmic has itself become a robotic and algorithmic thing to do. Yet this line of reasoning is almost invariably deployed to justify sticking with the prevailing legacy, modernist, liberal and humanist ways of working and thinking. The result, nothing changes. In fact, this may be a neutralizing strategy for ensuring nothing changes. Jean-Paul Sartre is quoted as saying, "The rebel secretly wants the world and the system to remain as it is. Its permanence, after all, is the guarantee of his continuing ability to rebel." In other words, many of us radicals are comfortable with society as it stands because it allows us to endlessly critique it and unite in solidarity with others in that critique without having to alter our own ways of being. And this reluctance to change is perhaps most apparent in publishing, which is why I'm interested in it. Although there's a striking parallel here with computational media such as AI. Theorists like Willem Flusser, Graham Harman, and Alex Galloway have all argued that computational objects are better understood not as machines, but as apparatuses, in which the mechanical dimension recedes or is hidden. In mass media, I show how this is not confined to computational media, how those media apparatus involved in the publishing process on which theory and theorists depend have mechanical aspects that disappear or otherwise masked too. Since the Royal Society first made it central to scientific life back in the 17th century, publishing, along with practices such as peer review and establishment of copyright, has become so embedded in scholarly practice that it now appears invisible, natural, unmarked. Over time, this has developed into a situation in which publishing with a profit-maximizing corporation of an original work by a unique human author in the form of a stable, uniform codex book that is then made available under an all rights reserved copyright license as a privately ownable commodity. That's come to be the unquestioned gold standard in the arts and humanities. This set of practice is not positioned as something to pay particular attention to. It's just seen as an already established, taken for granted system we must find a way of fitting into at the end of the research process. Even the most apparently politically radical of us have incentives not to question this arrangement. Doing so would risk undermining our brand name identity as an exceptional individual human author. To publish a book differently, even just with a non-profit open access press, would be to risk that status. It might mean no longer seeing our name on the shelves in bookshops at places like Tate Modern, for instance. And obviously, I'm really just jealous about this. But this is precisely the point. If we want things to be different, we have to act differently ourselves. We have to intervene in the world. And as part of this, we need to recognize that publishing is not just the end of the research process. It shapes every part of it. Not only that, it shapes us as liberal and humanist theorists too. As I write in mass media, our books and articles form the conditions of possibility for how we think and act. And that's the case even if we never actually publish our research. So if we want things to change, if we don't want the world to remain as it is, and so don't want to continue as pre-programmed, rebellious legacy theorists, we need different ways of creating and publishing and sharing ideas about art and computers and AI. And that's what my colleagues and I have been experimenting with in norm-critical projects such as Culture Machine and Robot Review of Books. And this brings me back at the end, once again, to AI and the human. What if, instead of ourselves parroting the critical consensus, we approach AI differently, as a chance to take a decision in an undecidable terrain as to what the human and its relation to the world actually is, rather than taking this for granted? Could we even see AI as providing an opportunity to radically reinvent and redesign ourselves as humans? And with this, our writing and publishing practices, our legacy ways of thinking and working and being as rebellious theorists, thinkers, artists. One of our latest norm-critical projects plays with this possibility through a set of badges parodying the 100% human-made movement in art. That movement promotes the common sense belief that genuine art can only be created by individual humans through flashes of inspiration born of lived experience. Our badges, by contrast, read things like 100% inhuman made, some AI used. And the accompanying text for the project affirms that the work was not created through a spark of solitary human genius, a claim to originality that, from a transfeminist and decolonial perspective, has been likened to a form of colonial violence. But rather, the work emerges from an assemblage of human and non-human forces, bodies and texts, software code and server farms, political infrastructures, and yes, AI. And although it's a critical response to the pro-human movement in art, This project is not about undermining the human. If anything, if you like, it's about saving it. As the climate emergency intensifies, Naomi Klein is only one of the latest thinkers to have emphasized the need to reimagine our modes of relation. The liberal humanist Euro-Western worldview that treats nature as a separate realm, something for humans to manage, exploit, or even heroically protect, is no longer fit for purpose. There's an intimate relationship between our overinflated selves and undercared for planet, Klein writes in Doppelganger. If the climate crisis can be understood as a surplus of heat-trapping gases in the atmosphere, it can also be understood as a surplus of self, she says. What's needed then is a different ethos, one of humility, of co-agency, and non-extractive being with. Here, the inhuman is not a negation of the human, but a refusal of the human-non-human divide. It's not about denying support to artists and authors, but about opening up new possibilities for subjectivity, creativity, and intelligence, and for radically redistributing resources and opportunities accordingly. And I mentioned the 100% inhuman badges, even though they're too new to have featured in mass media, because they go to the heart of my argument. Why we need to change our ways of working and thinking as theorists and artists. Because if we're not comfortable with society as it stands, if we want things to be radically different, if we want to relate to the planet and to others in terms of non-exploitative, non-extractive forms of being with and knowing with, then we have to act differently ourselves. And this includes how we think, how we create, how we write and publish. And hopefully, it's also begin to become clear with all this why I'm trying to avoid simply telling a story here, or giving you my biography or backstory, or even putting this argument in the form of a traditional linear narrative with a definitive beginning, middle, and end. I hope this talk has been more of a constellation or collage of voices and arguments, quotations, images, references, datum points, designed to destabilize the individualistic first-person human I as author. Indeed, if Bob Dylan has embarked on a never-ending tour, this is a never-ending talk, if you like. It can always be added to with different or new datum points, by me, by you, by AI, by all of us, in an inhuman collaboration. Thank you very much for listening. I really appreciate it.
Gary, thank you so much. Absolutely. Very, sort of tying down all those aspects, I think, to the sort of central question as to how we can change and update our thoughts about art. Just a couple of observations before I throw open the floor. The first one is that, in a way, copyright was intended to restrain the printing press. It was actually a way of responding to the sort of sudden flourishing of literacy and the way that people could sort of throw their views into the world through printing broadsheets and things, and copyright was intended perhaps to muzzle that. It seems, and that sort of came out the first Industrial Revolution or before it. So are we saying now that we can overturn that and find a way to actually just get rid of that antiquated device?
Yes, I think we are saying that. And there's also arguments that, before copyright, I mean, the usual argument is that no one would invent anything if they can't profit for it. But research does show that plenty of people still invented things, produced things, creative things, even before copyright. And then in some ways, we go back to a system, if we got rid of copyright, and I'm not saying we should in all cases, because certain people would be more vulnerable to exploitation if we just had a blanket universal liquidation of copyright. Some people would be more, in certain parts of the world, be more vulnerable to that than others. But more people would be able to create, and more people would benefit from it if we didn't have the currently existing system of IP and copyright.
Absolutely. And the second thing I'll just mention, it came to mind as you were talking. So if you can see that book there, Herbert Franker's Computer Graphics, Computer Art,
Oh,
1971. Interestingly, it was translated from German by Gustav Metzger.
okay.
So it contains, I think, a lot of food for thought, especially in relation to what you and Sean Carroll have done. But there's a chapter right at the end called Outlook, the Future of Computer Art. And I'll just read the very opening sort of phrase from it. It says this: the demystification of art is one of the most far-reaching effects of the use of computers in the arts. No sooner is it recognised that the creation of art can be formalised, programmed and subjected to mathematical treatment than all those secrets that used to enshroud art vanish. And so art loses its function as a substitute for faith. I thought that was quite, far-sighted of him back in
Yeah,
71. I
yeah,
think pointing towards a conclusion that
amazing.
we're
Yeah.
reaching now.
Sorry, I've got a cuckoo. I've already warned people.
You had the cuckoo. Was that as I was reading, or?
No, you were okay, just as you stopped. So
Ah, right.
it's
Good, good.
only 7 o'clock, so it'll be finished in a second.
There we are. So I was going to say, see, but I think Franke was also seeing that, and of course, him and Friedenacher and Metzger were all, part of that German school that maybe looks back towards Max Spencer. I mean, more particularly Narker and Franke looking back to Max Spencer, who tried to define information or the information within art, or art as something that arises informationally, for which he was attacked by lots of people at the time. But I feel that's somewhat inherent in what you say as well, is that we cast things out towards a machine and see in that something of ourselves, and that isn't, it's not an inauthentic process.
Mm. Yeah, sure. I mean, yes. It's interesting that, yes, and that's what I liked about the Listen Scoundrels project, looking back to kind of
Mm,
earlier thinkers and theorists. Obviously, the world's changed. You might not want to replicate all sorts of their politics. Might be still kind of a little bit on the modernist side. Um, but it's interesting to have to look back at some of those thinkers that are more radical than a lot of people feel able and maybe want to be today. I mean, a lot of the younger generation I was talking about in terms of internet theorists and things are quite angry about the older generations. They kind of think they never had it so good, and they spoilt all that opportunity that they had. Good jobs in universities, good jobs in the creative industries. And what did we do with it? We didn't succeed in changing the world for the better. So that's why a lot of younger people today not really interested in going to university. I mean, there's lots of reasons why they're not interested in going
mm.
to university, but they want to be creative outside of that.
Yeah.
One of my kind of issues is, well, yes, but how's that possible? And how do they not, end up being, what elsewhere I've called like micro entrepreneurs of themselves? They've just got to
Mm.
constantly promote themselves and things to survive, and which is understandable. But does that escape one trap and fall into another? So
Mm. Can I throw the floor open to, well, anyone who would like to comment or pose a question, either in the chat or if you'd like to unmute yourself and say something, please. If anyone's down there who wants to.
I'm going to get rid of the Bob Dylan because it's just too
Uh-huh.
generationally.
Hi, Sean. Yes, I see you've got a hand up.
Hey, how's it going? Thank you for the talk. It was fantastic to see it, and you had a lot more sources than I came up with, so there's some great reading in there. Um, Sorry, I've got a very naughty dog with me at the moment, which I'm holding on to.
It's all right. It's all about the non-human. It's okay.
Well, exactly. I think one of the things about AI that I've come across really generally is it feels like, I know, especially the type of AI that we have now, it feels like the start of a new medium,
Mm.
and new mediums causing this kind of disruption isn't a new thing, right? Like, but
Yeah, yeah,
you know, but like the photo didn't kill the painting, and
yeah, yeah.
TV didn't kill radio, and all of that, but they all did redistribute where the power
Hmm.
was. Um, and this is a tension with AI that I haven't really resolved for myself, and I was wondering what you think
Yeah.
about it, because in one way, it's very clear that a lot of the power in this medium comes from the few big organizations that are managing these models, but in another way, the way that we the way that they distribute that power feels quite democratic in that it feels empowering. Especially, I work with a lot of artists that have neurodivergences, and they're very empowered. I'm very empowered by using Chat GPT, but I know that I know that I know that the power also is somewhere else. And I wonder how you feel or how you navigate in that tension.
Well, it's very difficult and it's early days and it's just working out. I guess what I'm interested in, I mean, firstly, I mean, yes, it gives you a certain power, but how much do you get to say? I mean, it's the argument why people find open and free software important, because, okay, so software might empower you with certain things, but you're not the one that's getting to build it. You don't get to change it. You don't get to shape it. So it performs, you're allowed to feel empowered, but within certain limitations that you don't get any say over. One of the things, yes, that I guess me and my colleagues are arguing is, instead of just a blanket rejection of it, is there, I don't like to say the phrase third way, but is there some way that we can actually do something with it? Use this moment of change, this change from one kind of dominant media forms to another. Is there a moment you can do something in that gap, in that point of transition, and create something that we would be happy with, excited about, interested in? I mean, one of the things that I'm conscious of in this particular talk is I'm not going into too much detail about the different kinds of AI. So I'm concentrating on, the big bad AI in a lot of ways. But with the Open Humanities Press that I help run, we were approached recently by somebody who wanted to use our books in particular to build a small language model that they feel is going to be more ethical. It's not going to be kind of this all general purpose. It's going to focus on specific topics. They want it for the social sciences and humanities and just ask more questions of that. But they're not going to take material without asking. So they're asking us, and we asked all our authors and editors. And I was quite surprised that by far the majority, about 90%, 95% of people said, yes, we should go for this. We should let them have our material and see if we can build a different version of an AI, of a generative AI, of a small language model AI, to see, just to see, like, that's not just the two versions you can have it. You either love it unquestionably and don't think about it too much, or you kind of hate it, and just say, can we do something that's a bit more interesting and empowering for us? Obviously, we're just at the early days of that. That's just really the start, but I was quite excited about that. And I was surprised because when you see on social media, in our sphere, most people seem to be very negative about AI. It's, like I say, it's like kind of just fascist, and yes, Kay Crawford's calling it synthetic shit and things like this, which, some of it may be, but can we do something else with it? And it's not like other forms that we concerned with. All my problems with some of that is the research shows that AI uses a lot of environmental energy, but actually paper books use even more. So, but no one says, well, maybe we should stop publishing paper books. Maybe we should kind of transition out of that. And, the water and trees that involves is that's one of those things that's kind of masked or hidden or just taken for granted. So we can write loads of books about why AI is shit and bad. But those books, for some people, will be even worse. So,
thank you. I'd be keen to hear more about the small language model. I think that sounds like really good.
We're thinking, yes, these people that are in Erasmus University in Rotterdam, and they're either going to do an event or we might do an event, now that we know that we're not going to get just people throwing things at us all the time. It seems a bit safer. So if they don't do an event, we might do an event, or we might do one anyway, and things, just to try and talk through the issues a little bit. Because we don't know. I mean, we don't understand. I'm pretending I've got a really thought out, confident answer for you, but I'm kind of just making it up. But yeah, thanks for the exhibition, and yeah, thanks for the booklet. I've enjoyed reading the booklet. I've got the booklet. You also can get it online. I would say it's in all good bookshops, but it probably isn't. But it is available online, isn't it?
No,
So I
it's a
don't know.
good
Someone's
free
got the
download.
address. They can share it in the chat for people.
Awesome, thank you.
Right. Well, just to say, from the chats, there's a comment here by Dennis. I'll just draw your attention now. He says he completely agrees with everything you've said, which is good. But he says also this outlook, and I presume also the change of copyright, etc., would require a fundamental rethink of the economic system. He says certainly not Marxist, but what?
Yeah, well, that's what I was saying about politics. We're not just going to roll out a kind of, a system that was thought up of however many 100 and 150 years ago. We need something different. And I'd probably say that there wouldn't be a one size fits all anyway. You'd kind of, things I've been reading last few years are kind of coming from more Latin America and talking about pluriversal kind of modes of thinking, which would be kind of would push towards different notions of intellectual property and copyright. But because they're pluriversal, in some instances they might want to keep copyright or licensing. So some of the licenses I was using were kind of let me see if I can flick all the way through these. Yeah, some of them are talking about indigenous peoples. They don't want to kind of get rid of copyright in some cases, or just give up all their rights. That what they need is means of protecting them. Am I going to get that past it? I think there you go.
Yes, indeed.
So those different labels right at the bottom, they're kind of so in some cases people need it to protect their rights, and so it's not a one answer fits all. But what I'm interested in is trying to experiment with it and trying to open up the kind of conversation, which seems very hard because to my horror, I'm even kind of criticizing Paul McCartney and Kate Bush. And it's very sad. I mean, what kind of person criticizes Paul McCartney? I mean, it's just not right, is it? But there you go.
Right. I mean, on that, I mean, it seems to me the decentralization is inherent in what you're saying, and I think that is facilitated by certain models of, sort of computer exchange. And very briefly, obviously, people were talking about blockchain a few years ago as a potential route to that. That seems to have died down, I think, in recent times. I mean, do you see anything coming out of that sort of area like blockchain as being useful, or what?
I don't know enough about blockchain. I'm a bit kind of wary of blockchain because of its association with, the kind of eccentric right. So I don't know. I don't know enough about it. But I mean, it could be one. I mean, in the book, I kind of talk about how we could use some of these ideas that we've been using in terms of open access publishing and open source and things like that. Can you use them to try and redesign cities? And can you get communities? And the idea of making this stuff available, open and free would be for people in specific communities. It wouldn't be for us to kind of come up with a blanket. This should be for everyone everywhere and they should all do it like this. We have the answer. It would be more like, look, we've made this stuff available as we do already with our open access infrastructure and software and licenses and things. And people can take it and they can use it to build their own art galleries or museums or libraries or archives and do it in the way that they want. So if some people wanted to use blockchains or BitTorrents or NFTs or whatever they wanted, in fact, it worked for them, then they should do it. But the idea would be, it's a term thought of by my colleague Janneke Adema, scaling small. So instead of we've got a system that works for our press or whatever, let's just roll it out and make it bigger and have more and more people join us. It's more of a case of no, we're gonna keep it small. We don't want to get bigger. We're okay the size that we are, but other people can come and they can take our content because that's all available open and free. They can take our infrastructure. They can take our licensing. Janneke in particular provides lots of reports about how to do it, how this was done, how you can do it yourself, and then people can go and make their own galleries and libraries and museums and things, rather than us kind of telling them what to do. So I could see it being useful in something like that.
Absolutely. Okay, do we have anyone else with a question for Gary? Having a watch, yeah. So, no, I think as we see some of these solutions unfold, I suppose my own reticence about AI to some degree is the nature of the large organisations that sort of facilitate it, which again is why the SLM is actually quite attractive.
Yeah, yeah.
And the more I've looked into it for my own use, and actually my own use is purely selfish in a way, is to actually have a means of quizzing all the different PDFs and other sort of sources I've built up over the years in my own digital archive, which for it's been that's 20, 25 plus years of stuff just throwing in there. I don't know what's in there half the time, and I think having an SLM just to quiz that and to investigate some of the relations between things would actually just be beneficial purely on a scholarly level for me. I mean, that's very internal, it's very sort of inward focused, but nonetheless, that intrigues me. I think the way that an SLM could be developed.
Yeah, and it kind of, I mean, up until now, things like ChatGPT have been kind of operating on the freemium model. I mean, they make it available free so that everyone will use it, and theirs will get to be the one that you're using. I mean, they're gradually going down the same route that a lot of big tech platforms do. They start off freemium, but then they start thinking, well, we need to make money here. I see some reports. I haven't looked at it too closely, but OpenAI is going to, enable pornography and things on ChatGPT now. They're kind of switching
Oh
over to
yes,
that.
I
Yeah,
spotted that as well. Yes,
yeah,
indeed.
yeah. So again, they want more and more people to do it, and then how long before they start making they're gathering that data, all that information that people are sharing. If they're going to get into sex, they're going to be sharing it. People are already sharing it. And it's moved from a kind of useful tool of help you writing emails or letters, and people are having relationships with it. They're kind of sharing all sorts of personal stuff. They're using it as mentors, counselors, therapists. Even getting partners on there, so you've got even more personal material, if you like, than might be available elsewhere online. And they've got how long before that's made available? And we can see what Trump's doing with all that kind of stuff. If you want to go to America now, where they're going to kind of search your internet history, what's on your phone, and see what you've said, about him. Have you cut him off and not let you in or deport you? But if you're going to have even more personal stuff, then it's kind of gets into that capitalist surveillance model. It gets even scary, if you like. So Sean's right, in some senses it's more democratic because it's free and we all use it, but it's also more scary in terms of control. So yes, trying to do something where we will build this small language model. It's used for a specific purpose. That information is not shared with anyone outside of this particular project. We only use it if we've given permission to, and after that, we delete it. That's kind of a bit more of an interesting model, a way of doing it. Obviously, yes, that's financially we're not going to compete with the big boys, but
Yeah, because I suppose in my sense, controlling data is something more, not so much the copyright side, but actually the control of data about oneself or one's views or etc. To what extent one can keep that personal or should be able to. I suppose that's another quite fundamental aspect of this.
Yeah, well, it's the idea we're all on Facebook and Instagram and all those things. Even if you're not signed up to it, they've got that much information about us. If it's not through us, then it's through family, friends, mentions, and all this kind of stuff. So we're already on there anyway. So yeah, towards the end of the mass media book, I'd kind of work through different ways of kind of trying to be anonymous or trying to avoid that. And in many respects, you can't even wearing masks these days. I mean, they've got such facial identity now, and particularly with AI, they can identify you with your earlobes, with vein patterns, all kinds of stuff. So it's not really any way of kind of disappearing. But there's little tactics and things you can play with. And
that's true. Yes, there were people printing up various patterns that would deflect, certain types of cameras, but they, as you say, they've probably learned how to look past them. And again, that's another issue. Camouflaging oneself in a digital environment is an interesting, sort of problem. Right. I'm just going to say, anyone else, if you'd like to contribute anything to the conversation, or if anyone else wants to chime in with a comment, be it on the Oh yes, I should mention actually. You remember you showed the actor in the airport bookshop, and you asked if anyone would recognise him.
Somebody
Um,
recognise?
yes, indeed. Tim Pickup from Genetic Moves said he's Jacob Elordi, who's going to be playing Frankenstein.
That's very impressive. Okay, all right. I doubt he's looking. I pitched him as he's looking for, like, books by Flusser and Heidegger and things. I doubt that's quite happening in that airport bookshop. Um,
But
okay,
yes,
now that's very impressive. The next question would be, why has he got two hats? He's got one
oh,
on and then he's got one attached to his bag. Why has
that's
he got
great.
two hats? But anyway,
Oh,
uh,
yes. Do that indeed.
that would be a bonus.
Yeah.
Bonus to that
If
one.
anyone can answer that, that's
But at least he's, at least he's promoting reading. He's got a book in his,
absolutely.
in his
Mm.
pocket there and things, and he's looking for another one. So, it's
Mm.
okay. That's all right.
Just on that note, I mean, obviously, as a great lover of old-fashioned books as well, but what do you say about the production process and the costs associated with printing on paper? I think that should be out there. So, I mean, I think somebody should put that out there as a counter to the AI energy costs equation, which is also there as well. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if that could be. I don't know if that could be sourced or formalized, but it's an interesting thought that it's a very energy intensive process to pulp up trees and pump them full of water and then from that create the
Yeah.
pages for a book.
I think it is somewhere buried deep in mass media somewhere. I think
Okay.
that kind of that information is there,
Mm.
but it's getting harder. I mean, we're having to have a little bit of a rethink at Open Mantis Press because we
Mm.
do. I mean, we make all the PDFs, HTML. We kind of make them free, but if people want the paper books, and people do still think we kind of do that more or less at kind of cost price, but that's going up and up, and largely, I mean. Cory Doctorow's got a new book about
Yeah.
justification about it. And he talks about how Amazon's kind of bumping up the prices,
Mm.
just anything. And so, yeah, we're feeling the impact of that, even though we're not in with
Mm.
Amazon, things like that, but, various services that we have to use. So, yeah, that cost is going up. So we're having to think of different ways that we can keep prices reasonable for people and, as neat a cost as we can. So that
Yeah.
is an issue, yeah.
Mm. But
Because
no,
we love paper books. I mean, I don't want to say
yeah.
any of this. I mean, it's paper
Mm.
books is how we got into all of this.
Of course,
So
of course. But but much has been said about the academic pricing of books. I mean, generally,
yeah, yeah,
I very much support the open publishing model to break some of those monopolies, which again have been there for years.
yeah.
And somehow, despite the creation of digital sort of presses and things, it doesn't seem to have swayed the big academic presses. If anything, they've actually been gobbling each other up and creating more monopolies.
Yes, it's very difficult because I mean, the argument is, just in case anyone doesn't know, is we're academics. We're not going to get rich off selling this stuff. So basically, we give our work away for free to academic presses, and what they do is they sell it back to us. They sell it back to our libraries. And so if anyone wants to get, I mean, I don't. I'm giving you my stuff away. I just want you to read it. I'm not bothered. I'm never going to get rich. I'm not bothered about the money. I just want you
Mm.
to read it. That's my priority. But
Yeah.
if you want to buy an academic book, it's what is it, £60, £70
Yes.
sometimes. And so my stuff's great, but I don't know that I'd recommend too many people paying 60 quid for it.
Mm.
And so yeah, it's trying to what we're doing with in the open access world is trying to cut out that kind of that middleman and kind of cut out that price and make this stuff available to everyone because it's as we saw in things like COVID pandemic and stuff,
Mm.
access to knowledge and science and research is pretty important. So
Absolutely. And I mean, you've written on Sci-Hub and Z Library and things like that, where in
yeah,
fact how should I say, the sharing of such data is encouraged and.
yeah. No, well, they've kind of gone down that model as just
Mm.
as they believe that this knowledge should be publicly funded, so it
It
should
is,
be
exactly.
available. It should be available to the public, and so they've kind of gone down that way. But yes, they get classed as well. Shadow libraries is one term for it. Pirate libraries is another.
Mm.
But they get demonized and described as being illegal, and then as I say, Amazon and its practices that's seen
Quite.
as perfectly legal. So
Yeah.
they would challenge that.
Mm. But it's the monopoly in the end that gets the yes, sort of skims off those profits.
Yeah.
Well, listen, if if nobody else is going to chime in, and thank you very. I mean, we started with 44 people. We've still got 36 online, but a
Okay.
very large thank you to Gary, and much appreciated for everything you've laid out this evening, and to Sean for responding on the hoof at
I
the very
appreciate
start.
it.
So
Oh, that's very kind. Very kind for inviting me and for hosting me and looking after me so well. I know I kind of launched straight into it, but yes, no, I'm very grateful. I've enjoyed it. It's good, and I enjoyed the previous exhibitions and discussions at CAS and things. So I really appreciate everything that you do. So it's great.
yeah. And I do think the society should keep following this path. I think it's actually a very, timely and historic, and something that really should be, something that we put at the heart of what we're doing. So I think a notice to our other collaborators and something there, or we should see how we can take this further, because it needs to be debated and brought to the fore, I think.
Yeah, and I wanted to get the point across. It's building what you've already been doing. I mean, at various points in the past, it's kind of not just new. I mean, it's already there in your history and things. So, it's great. It's really exciting.
Excellent. Well, once again, thank you,
Thank
David.
you. All
Thank you
right.
very much for
Thanks, everybody.
running the Zoom and sorting everything out.
Yeah, yeah.
And thanks to everybody, one and all. So
All right.
good night.
Good night.